Hello, I'm Chris Fowler for Sports Century. His appeal was a mix of sex and sock. His smile was so dazzling that he made the girls squeal. He was a real knockout. So was his left hook. Oscar De La Hoya seduced the public and punched out his opponents. Like most who make their living by rendering other people senseless, he came from hard circumstances. And to remind himself of those East LA roots, he carries a $1 food stamp in his wallet.
This is a kid from the East LA barrio. I don't think he grew up in poverty, but he certainly grew up in near poverty.
Oscar was the meal ticket. He was going to bring up that whole family. And his father saw to it that he did.
Skateboarding was my pastime. My father didn't want me to skateboard because I would get hurt. I was going to become this fighter.
His life was basically going to the gym, coming home, training.
Oscar's father really believed that you couldn't be as good as the next guy. You had to be better than the next guy just to be even. And so consequently, nothing you do is ever good enough.
He's a warrior because his father pushed him out in that ring. He doesn't burn to fight. What he burned to do was to please his father.
He never said to me, son, you're doing great, or you fought a great fight. He never said that to me.
His mother was the shelter. His mother was the person who people saw to give the joy to that family.
She didn't want me to become a fighter, but my father would push it every single day. You have to become this fighter. We learned to live with it.
The mom would get him up early to do his running. She would make him his meals. She would pat him on the back.
Any little bruise, any little ailment he had, he used to run straight to mommy.
His mother alleviated some of the stress and strain that he had with his old man. There was a real deep bond in love there.
With his mother in his corner, Oscar De La Hoya excelled in a sport that was even less forgiving than his father. He did it not only with talent and heart, but also with a sizzling physical attraction that drew a new audience to ringside.
Unbelievable box office attraction. Nothing like it south of the heavyweight division in history. He became Ricky Martin of boxing.
At his weigh-ins, he would attract throngs of screaming teenage girls. It was more like a rock concert than a boxing event.
Latinos have been famous, but never this kind of cross-cultural idol.
He brought attention to our business, and he brought attention to the people that would normally not watch boxing because he was good-looking. He could speak English and Spanish.
I remember being so impressed with how smooth and self-assured he was, answering the questions without missing a beat.
People liked Oscar personally, and a lot of the media just fell in love with the character of Oscar De La Hoya. He was charming, and he was able to win a lot of people over.
Not everyone bought De La Hoya's style. Despite a 31-0 record with 25 knockouts and 4 titles to his credit, many fight fans described him as having more style than substance. In September of 1999, De La Hoya sought to silence his critics when he met Felix Trinidad to unify the welterweight title.
They were number 1 and number 2, pound for pound, fighters in the world.
It was huge for both men. Deep inside, they had known for years that this confrontation was coming and would probably be the defining moment of their careers.
These were 2 young Latinos in their primes, one from Puerto Rico, one from LA. Perfect way to draw fans.
Everybody talked that week and wrote about how De La Hoya would not lose a close decision in Vegas. More than half his fights at that point had taken place in Vegas. It's his place.
Before a packed house charged with high rollers and not a few adoring women, the Golden Boy fulfilled his role as the city's major boxing attraction since Mike Tyson had fallen into general disfavor. Sticking and moving, De La Hoya was dominating.
Oscar looked beautiful.
Right hand by De La Hoya, right up the middle.
He was doing what he wanted to with Trinidad, short of knocking him out.
My trainers told me, box. You have to box. That's the way you're gonna beat him. I was sticking my jab in his face anytime I wanted to. I was having a great time in that ring.
Trinidad was beaten up. Felix wasn't used to that kind of speed, and I think through 9 rounds, Oscar clearly was the winner of the fight.
In fact, I left after the 9th round to go to my television site to do my broadcast, knowing full well he'd won the fight.
Outclass is too big a word for what's happening here, but it's verging on that.
Then the unexpected happened. De La Hoya's flash, speed, and precision left him.
Oscar is just running now. He's not fighting back at all.
You couldn't understand. Why stop? I wasn't sure if he didn't want to get hit anymore or what it was. It was very, very bizarre.
Oscar De La Hoya's instincts as a fighter should have said, okay, I'm going to take this guy out. But that never happened. When it was Oscar De La Hoya's time to be able to define his greatness, he ran.
Trying to do just enough to keep Felix off of him, virtually giving away the round.
He ran out of gas, and he was running for those 3 rounds to save his life.
Trinidad is a big puncher, and Oscar knew that if he stood and traded punches with Trinidad in rounds 10, 11, and 12, he was going to get knocked out.
That was the moment that defined Oscar De La Hoya. He really wasn't prepared to step up and seize the moment and be a great fighter.
The winner by majority decision,
There was no way he won 7 rounds to win that fight. The last 3 rounds, that was backpedaling a bit, boxing. But for some reason, he got the decision.
I was never sure that Oscar really wanted to win the Trinidad fight. He didn't portray life and death type desire in the ring that night.
Professional judges don't like running. Even if Trinidad wasn't being effective, he was aggressive. Oscar was just a one-trick pony and could not adjust.
He had vindicated all the critics who said, you see, he really doesn't want to be a fighter. He's not really a tough guy.
If De La Hoya's first loss placed his toughness in deeper doubt, support from an unexpected source helped heal his battered pride.
That was the first fight where Oscar's father went up to him and says, hey, you fought well, and I'm proud of you.
He once told me that he would give up all his belts and his medal and everything else to hear his father say that he's a great fighter.
Now he was down. He didn't need to be beaten on by anybody else. For that instant, at least, his father could say, you did a good job.
He knew that deep down inside it was hurting me. He was the only person that was going to make me feel better about myself. He embraced me and told me, hey, don't worry about it. It's in my blood. I sometimes say that I hate the sport, but deep down inside I love it.
On his way to compiling a 223-5 record as an amateur, De La Hoya received international exposure when he won a gold medal in the featherweight division of the 1990 Goodwill Games. Meanwhile, his mother was fighting a battle she wouldn't win.
After winning the gold medal, I found out she had cancer. It was a pain that I've never felt before.
She had missed a few sessions of chemo without the doctor's consent. She wanted to see Oscar win one more time before she got really, really bad.
On October 28, 1990, De La Hoya lost his biggest fan. Cecilia succumbed to breast cancer.
It happened suddenly to him in a condensed period of time. She's telling him that she was very sick and was uncertain about the future. Then all of a sudden she's dead.
I had left boxing for a while. I just didn't want to deal with it. Until about 3-4 months before the Olympic Games, I decided to come back because that was something that she always wanted her son to do.
He vowed that he would win the gold medal for his mother. It was the most oft written about part of the whole Olympic experience.
It makes Oscar's story very much like a TV movie. It endows him, as far as the public can see, with this extraordinary virtue that he's going to win for his mother in heaven.
Driven by the pledge to win Olympic gold in memory of his mother, De La Hoya reached the final in the lightweight division at Barcelona in 1992. He and German Marco Rudolph battled into the 3rd round.
There was about a minute left to the fight. I closed my eyes and threw a left hook and dropped him.
Huge left hand by Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya has kept the promise to his mother.
I remember him holding up the gold medal as if to say, "Here, Mom, here it is." It was a great moment, and it was very inspiring.
I was on that podium receiving the gold medal, listening to the anthem. I broke down in tears. It was just the most amazing feeling I've ever had.
And that not only interests male sports fans, that interests women sports fans, because they see a beautiful kid who is looking towards his mother with sad eyes, fulfilling this destiny.
As soon as he got back into town, the first thing he did, he placed the gold medal at her gravesite.
Stood there for hours talking to her and told her, you know, here's your gold medal that I promised you.
After paying his respects to his mother, De La Hoya tuned his eyes toward the professional ranks. His likely choice as a manager was Shelley Finkel, who had financially nurtured the prospect during his amateur career. But Oscar's father, Joel Sr., blocked the way.
The one thing that Joel De La Hoya said was they were not going to sign with Shelley Finkel no matter what.
He'd invested about $100,000 plus, including hospital expenses for Oscar's mother when she was dying of cancer, burial expenses for the funeral. All of a sudden, Finkel can't get his telephone calls to Oscar answered.
That's a stain on his reputation, even though maybe it wasn't him who was making the decision. They went wherever the money was.
With Joel Sr. calling the shots, De La Hoya accepted an unprecedented $1 million management deal with untried New Yorkers Steve Nelson and Robert Middleman. After Oscar's first pro fight, Bob Arum signed on as his promoter.
The plan was to build the record and build the exposure and have him constantly out in front of the public.
He fought a who's who of nobodies, has-beens, you know. I was very careful with him.
By the end of 1993, De La Hoya had won his first 11 pro fights, 10 by knockout. But when he wasn't winning in the ring, he was falling victim to fortune.
The balance between normalcy in life and this goal to become a money-making machine was thrown totally out of whack at that point.
Oscar was spending as much as $10,000 a day on Lamborghinis, on clothes, on pool tables.
After that year, he had about $4,000 in his bank account, and he hadn't even paid his taxes.
With his first title fight looming, De La Hoya became distracted by an identity crisis.
In El Paso, he's fighting a guy that really was no threat, that nobody had ever heard of, and the people went crazy, and especially the young girls. It was like when the Beatles came over to the United States for the first time.
There's thousands of screaming teenagers. The police were holding them back, and lo and behold, they break through the barricades. And my thought is, I'm going to die. Oscar just yells, "Here they come," and at that moment, he's enveloped by hundreds of teenage girls. It was amazing.
Oscar had a particular clientele that was his and his alone, not just for a boxer, for an athlete.
I'm the magnet. Girls go to the magnet. This is how he thinks about himself.
Now, I know when you were boxing, you used to abstain from sex. So I guess imagine the same with singing. You have to have that same dedication.
Same mentality.
Really?
4, 5, 6 months without, before a performance, before a...
Really?
I've always thought that Oscar enjoyed being a celebrity more than he enjoyed being a fighter, because celebrity brought him everything he loved. The women, the invitations to the golf courses, the nightclubs.
You ask what are Oscar's favorite hobbies? Women, golf, women.
He measures every woman against his mom, and they fall short, because he does have this very idealized notion of his mother.
Whether or not De La Hoya sought to replace his mother, his celebrity was not appreciated by many males in the Mexican community on either side of the border.
There's always been some sort of ethnic ambiguity to Oscar. He's Mexican by blood, but he's a very American fighter. He incurred the wrath of a lot of Mexican fight fans because I think that they felt he played too white.
The Mexican fan wants to see rough and tumble fights. Oscar never wanted to have his face messed up.
In March of 1994, the Golden Boy won his first title by knocking out junior lightweight champ Jimmy Breedall. A little more than 2 years later, the stylist hoped to change his pretty boy image against Julio Cesar Chavez for the WBC lightweight championship.
Chavez had built up a tremendous reputation among Mexicans and Mexican Americans as being this great warrior. He was their guy.
There was a passion for Chavez to beat De La Hoya, not just because they liked Julio more, but they liked what he represented more, someone who bled for them.
Oscar was so angry about being the outcast among his people that he was going to make Chavez pay for that.
Brutal left hook by De La Hoya. Chavez's will seeming to be sapped with all Oscar De La Hoya.
It showed he could go in with Chavez, who was the warrior, and go toe-to-toe with him and win the slugging match and just leave Chavez a bloody mess.
The fans hopefully appreciated all this, and I just wanted to give a good show for them.
They still did not support him. They still believed that he only won it because Julio was cut.
In their rematch in September of 1998, De La Hoya stood beyond reach of Chavez and dispatched the aging Lion in the 8th round. He'd already won his 4th title, a controversial decision over Pernell Whitaker in 1997, a year in which he made $38 million. But if opponents couldn't beat him, the options that came with wealth and fame threatened to knock him out.
The problem is that he didn't recognize the limits and the responsibilities that his celebrity placed on him. He indulged himself. He stepped beyond the bounds.
He's had 2 kids out of wedlock, so his private life has been less than golden.
Somebody like Oscar, a healthy desire for the opposite sex, invariably would get into trouble.
In December of 1998, De La Hoya was accused of rape for the 2nd time. Neither case went to trial. But one of the cases was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount of money.
The bigger you are, the broader your ripples in the pond, the more you're a lightning rod for that kind of stuff. His attorney gave a quote which basically said, Oscar has been in bed with so many women, how could he possibly remember one?
If he was not the super celebrity that he is, a lot of these incidents would be brushed away.
No criminal charges have ever been filed, but still it was in the background, and it all added to this image of a golden boy becoming tarnished. All the promise of the early years kind of crumbling.
There's no in between. You either think he's the golden boy, or you think he's the devil, and there's something phony about it.
You can never tell with Oscar what's from Oscar and what's from the inner circle, which is another way of saying Oscar's father.
After a career in which the father and son made many enemies, De La Hoya, at 27, met the hard edge of his lifestyle when he faced Sugar Shane Mosley in June of 2000.
When the 12th round came, Oscar and Mosley duked it out. But Oscar was the tired fighter, and Mosley was a lot fresher.
Shane Mosley is out hustling Oscar De La Hoya, out working him, out fighting him when it matters most.
When it was over, De La Hoya was crushed. For the first time, the golden boy, in his own mind, knew he'd lost. And he didn't handle it well.
Why not give it a draw or something, you know? I mean, but to take it away from me like that, I just don't feel it's justice.
He was the golden boy who was never going to lose and was going straight to the Hall of Fame, and it confused him.
Although De La Hoya would later admit that Mosley had legitimately beat him, he fired trainer Roberto Alcazar, who had been with him since his amateur days. Then he split with Bob Arum, the promoter who had helped him earn over $125 million.
Oscar begins to feel very threatened by people who have control over his money. He had felt threatened by Arum for years.
Oscar exhibited a certain type of ruthlessness in his pursuit of independence.
After compiling a 32-2 record over 7.5 years, De La Hoya took a 9-month hiatus to pursue a childhood fantasy, singing. His first album, titled Oscar De La Hoya, topped Billboard's Latin dance charts for several weeks.
I've always had this dream of recording an album. Got nominated for a Grammy. I was pretty happy about that.
But the ring beckoned, and with new trainer Floyd Mayweather Sr. calling the shots, De La Hoya defeated Arturo Gatti in March of 2001. 3 months later, he won his 5th title in as many weight classes, picking apart WBC's super welterweight champ Javier Castillejo. That October, he married Puerto Rican singer Milly Correcher.
I think that he's had his fling with life, and now he is going to be happy in a monogamous relationship.
I've had my ups and downs in my personal life, and I finally set my priorities straight. She's a woman that is like no other.
He's found somebody who truly loves him. That's the thing that has been missing from his life ever since his mother died.
His private life stabilized, De La Hoya tended an old wound by reconciling with Bob Arum in 2001. In September of 2003, he was beaten again by Mosley, and a year later he suffered the first knockout of his career by middleweight champ Bernard Hopkins. Despite the losses, De La Hoya remained highly bankable.
It would have been unthinkable decades ago that a Hispanic fighter would have the economic impact on the sport that he has. It's no longer unthinkable.
I think that Oscar fights because he has a passion to fight, and I personally believe that passion is directly related to his need, his desire to try to please his father. But as for the notion that Oscar's joy has come in any way from his millions, his titles, his public, I don't buy that at all. I think that Oscar's life is a constant struggle of being caught between two worlds, and he hasn't yet found the one place where he really wants to be, and he's not going to find that until boxing is all done with.
The year before he won his gold medal at the 1992 Olympics, Oscar De La Hoya was held up at gunpoint on the very streets of East LA from which he had sprung. 3 thugs robbed him of $150. Hours later, his doorbell rang. When he answered, he found his wallet and all of the money. "I guess they knew who I was," he said. Sometimes a reputation can be a handy thing to have. For Sports Century, I'm Chris Fowler.